Hello, my name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glen Bard School and Community Projects Coordinator. I am delighted that you could join us for this very important conversation today. This is the book we'll be discussing, Rescuing Our Sons and Daughters Today, 8 Solutions to Our Crisis of Disaffected Youth. You want to pick up one of these? Everyone is welcome here, and we encourage you to please like us on social media, let a friend or relative know across the street or across the country. Everybody is welcome to the GPS Parent Series. Thank you for that. Thank you also to the sponsors who make it possible. We couldn't do this all without you. So quickly, before we begin this important conversation with Dr. Duffy, I want to tell you about upcoming events. This topic will be continued next Tuesday. Once again, you'll have an opportunity to see it at 7 p.m. virtually or in person. In person, we will be in Naperville at the Naperville Library, Nichols Library. So join us then if you can. Again, a book giveaway that night as well. And the topic next Tuesday on October 22nd at noon at 7 p.m. with Dr. Laura Kohler is teen anxiety and school anxiety. Again, listen at noon, listen at 7 virtually, or come in person. And we'll be happy to see you in person if you're able to. And then the week following, we have an interesting topic. Melinda Moyer has a book called How Not to Raise an Asshole. And so I'm sure many of us can relate. And so I hope that you'll join us. We're calling it How to Raise Teens You Want to Spend Time With, to be PC. So, but that's the title of the book. And we'll laugh and we'll learn, as we always try to do here at GPS. And then to continue into February, into November, we will be welcoming Ron Lieber back. His very important book is called The Price You Pay for College, the Most Important Decision Your Family Will Ever Make. That is on Thursday, November 7th at noon and at 7 p.m. with lots of time for your questions. I hope you'll join us and I hope you'll share the resource. Then we'll have another in-person event on November 13th. You can hear about all of these programs. This one's called Saving Superman. You might have heard about Best Buddies, and will be hosted by Best Buddies at Glenbard West that night. Go to the website, find the resources there that can really impact your family. Without further ado, it's my honor to introduce Jordan Pohl. Jordan is the Glenbard Directions Program Principal. He has the honor of the introductions. Jordan, it's yours.
Thank you so much, Gilda. My name is Jordan Paul. I'm the principal of the Glenbard Directions Program, and I'm here to introduce Dr. John Duffy. Dr. John Duffy is a highly sought-after clinical psychologist, best-selling author, parenting and relationship expert, and proud husband and father. He's been working with individuals, couples, teens, and families for over 25 years. His clients include major corporations like Allstate, General Electric, ExxonMobil, and Bank of America. Along with his clinical work, Dr. Duffy is the author of 3 best-selling books, The Available Parent, Parenting the Teen in the New Age of Anxiety, and his most recent book is titled Rescuing Our Sons, 8 Solutions to Our Crisis of Disaffected Boys. He is a frequent expert in local and national print media and is a regular parenting and relationship expert on Steve Harvey. He also appears on other national and local television and radio outlets, including The Today Show, WGN, NPR, The Huffington Post, The Wall Street Journal, and others that are too numerous to mention. We are delighted to welcome him back to the GPS Parent Series today, Dr. John Duffy.
Thank you so much, Jordan, and thank you, Gilda. I am so grateful to be back with the Glenbard Parent Series group, and I so appreciate all of you for taking time out today to join me here and talk about our disaffected youth. I think I first probably addressed your group a while back, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and back then I was talking about my concerns among these pockets, these subsets of kids who were in certain degrees of difficulty, trouble academically, socially, and otherwise, and how we might help mitigate their concerns, their stressors, their depression, their anxiety. Now, I'm concerned about our kids kind of across the board in this post-pandemic era and this very, very screen-centric era, it is really important that we parent from a place of knowing. And it is very difficult to do that when there are new apps, new social media, new delivery devices for drugs coming on the scene all the time. So that is a big part of the reason we're here. My concerns are only amplified over the years. And I suspect you're here in large part because you're seeing at least some of this as well. A little bit, as Jordan was saying, I am a clinician primarily. I've been doing my job for about 30 years. I've been working with teens and tweens that entire time. So I've seen these trends kind of come and go, but there are certain trends that I'm going to highlight today that are persistent and are growing and we need to know about. And I'm going to offer you some ideas, some really useful ideas that will help you stem the tide of some of the stressors that our kids are dealing with. But let's say you have to go right now. Let's say you left the iron on or something important is going on and you have to leave with one idea. The sole idea I need you to understand is our kids, the commodity we're trading in today is hope. Our kids are persistently, increasingly more hopeless. And this is alarming to me. What I'm seeing is this. I'm seeing a disconnection from themselves and from other people, leading to a sense of loneliness, leading to kind of a pervasive joylessness that I bet a lot of you are nodding your heads and you see in your kids. All of that funnels down into hopelessness. And everything I talk about, I'm going to talk about some really specific issues and difficulties and problems. But if we can mitigate hopelessness, we manage an awful lot of this stuff. So bear with me here today, because I'm going to start with the bad news. As Jordan pointed out, when I last addressed your group in person, I had published a book called Parenting the New Teen in the Age of Anxiety. An awkward title, I admit to this moment, but it's a title I needed because we were dealing with a brand new kind of teenager, and the anxiety of the moment was high and getting higher. So it was the right thing at the right time and remains so. So here are some of the things that I was talking about back in 2019 that remain issues here very much so in 2024. The main one, the one that's probably front and center and maybe bothers you the most, is social media. So social media, we know, drives a whole lot, way too much of the self-worth and the self-esteem of our kids. So whereas a decade ago, I could have been talking to your group and saying followers and likes and comments, this is where our kids are gaining their sense of self-worth. That is more so true today. And they've got a whole bunch of different social media to attend to. One girl calls it identity traffic, where she has to keep track of who she is on Snapchat versus who she is on Instagram versus who she is on TikTok, and so on. And it is arduous and it takes a lot of time and energy. And typically the kids I know and the kids I work with come away from their social media time not feeling very good about themselves. So it's not a very effective tool for gaining self-esteem. But if you want to feel pretty terrible about yourself, just picture how you feel yourself as a parent or as an educator when you go on social media. Typically, you can find something to feel bad about because somebody has curated something that looks amazing, or AI has created something that looks amazing and tantalizing and fun. And so all those issues are at play, and social media is a primary driver of body image issues now. It's not other kids as much as it is social media. And it's not just some subset of girls. It is girls and boys across the board have this dysmorphia because they are comparing themselves to impossible image and sometimes computer generated images. It is really, really distressing. Our kids are undergoing academic pressure like no other generation before them. Couple weeks ago, I was presenting live to a group, and I got an ahem from the crowd, and this man raised his hand. And he said, "Hey, wait a minute, man. We had a lot of academic pressure when I was a kid too. So really, I'm not gonna pretend like my kid has it worse." And we ended up having this discussion. We were talking about like if we were, so he had gone to college, as had I. And I said, if we were applying to our colleges now with our grades, our SAT scores, our extracurricular activities, do we get into that school? And I went to Notre Dame, he had gone to Northwestern, and we both agreed, oh, we would not have made it to the waiting list. And that is a fact. But our kids, they feel the weight of that. They know that it is super, super, super competitive to get into school. So I'll work with a 15-year-old. This happened recently, who got a C on an assignment, like a quiz, and thought, I think I've blown my chance. And you can feel that she's kind of on this verge of giving up when it's like, oh, no, 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 this is one little thing. We need to be resilient to this. But they hear enough from those end caps at Barnes and Noble that say like, who gets in and why? And why isn't your kid in 4 AP classes? And, what are you doing as a parent that you're letting this happen? That creates stress for the family and puts a lot of stress on kids from exceptionally young ages, sometimes pre-high school. Kids are thinking like, I think I messed up bad enough that I'm not going to make it academically. You talk about hopelessness. That's a pretty good recipe for it. As a result of those, we know that we're seeing this increase in drug use. And I think I'm speaking for a lot of us when I say, this is a really confusing time if you're trying to track drug use, right? We find these pipes or these little devices, and we're not sure, is this a nicotine thing? Is this a THC thing? Is this weed? I don't even know what I'm looking at here. I don't know what my kid is ingesting, but I know I'm finding a lot of these things, right? I know that, and this is no longer the stoner kid, right? I in my high school class of 1,000, we could name about 5 or 6 guys who were drug problems. Now, a lot of kids, if you ask your kids now, like, what percentage of your class do you think uses something sometimes? You're going to get a really shockingly high number, right? And this stuff is not innocuous, right? Marijuana, for example, is something like 30 times more potent than it was 30 years ago. So this is a very different drug than it once was. And this is the drug of choice right now. So some kids are eschewing alcohol in favor of marijuana, but a lot of kids are using it before their feet hit the floor in the morning, in the bathroom at school, and a lot of kids before they go to bed at night. And they think they need this drug to make it through the day. They don't believe they are competent and resilient without it. And we know that there are risks beyond just use, right? Because by my estimation, in our area or here in Chicago land, every 2 months or so, there is an influx of fentanyl reports. That's I noticed that's the cadence, 2 months or so. And we know that there are these tragic deaths that, make the news. Some of them make the news, some of them do not, but they happen. But what also happens is that some kids who get a little fentanyl poisoning believe they cannot think well. They have brain fog. I can't function well. So they will come to me. I'll give them a cognitive test. They're perfectly fine. They'll get MRIs and they'll come to me and say, I can't believe the doctor missed my brain tumor. So kids can get out of this, but it takes about a year. So our fentanyl lecture is requisite. We have to talk to our kids about some of these uncomfortable, awful things. Speaking of which, and I promise you, I'm going to give some bad news, but hang in here with me. There's a lot we can do about this stuff. So I know that this is heavy. School shootings are on the minds of our kids. And that seems to be true more now, right now, than any other year. And I think it's anticipatory. As the school year started, the first week of the year, I was sitting across from a girl. She was 16 years old. And she was talking about, like, I think it's going to happen in my school, Duffy. I'm pretty sure I know who the boys who are going to do it, almost always boys. And I don't think they're getting help. I don't think they're any happier. Let's face it, it's school shooting season. And you can't tell me that's not going to happen. And I can't. She's right about that. So the best we can do is comfort our kids, let them know we're working on it. But this is on their minds while they're in school. So that's a problem. This is my least favorite thing to talk about, but it is pervasive. Pornography is driving a lot of what our kids, and it's available to them right here. And most of our boys in particular are looking at pornography virtually every day. I'm going to tell you an awful story here for a second. I work with a 13-year-old boy, and he said, here's how porn goes. When you're 8 or 9, you stumble upon Pornhub. And that's light porn. That's G-rated porn. But by the time you get to my age, and he is 13, that's when you get to hardcore stuff that's like traumatic and upsetting. So if we wonder why our kids are not connecting with each other, why there is no intimacy, why there isn't those giddy butterflies of like, oh boy, should I talk to her or should I talk to him? And that stuff's just not happening in the hallways. Part of that is that these kids are watching relationships that aren't real and sexuality that is not real. And it's giving them a really twisted view of relationships and intimacy and all of it. And so a lot of them are just saying, oh, I don't want anything to do with any of this. It's just too awful. Turning the page to something that is interesting that's happened lately. In the TikTok era, kids are putting up TikToks in the mental health sphere that are really, really cool and really helpful. I love this generation because, like, if I'm suffering anxiety and I'm 16, I might just put my phone in a ring light here and make a video for other 16-year-olds who might be feeling anxious and say, hey, if you're feeling this, this, and this like I am, you might try this, or a deep breathing exercise. Let's do it together now, which is awesome. I love that about these kids. And you might, in all likelihood, like me, as I went down this rabbit hole, I watched another video, also pretty helpful and pretty amazing. But if you keep going down the rabbit hole, and TikTok is endless and vast, and it's the great unknown, by hour 3 or 4 or 5, kids start to identify deeply with the emotional disorders. By the time they land on the couch behind me, kids have already identified themselves as unwell, depressed, anxious, sick. So nobody leads with, I'm a musician, I'm an athlete, I'm a scholar, I'm a really kind person. No, it's, I can't do it. I can't do the things that people do because I'm not well. I'm not capable. As one kid put it to me, I can't go to school, Dr. Duffy. I have school refusal. Not very useful, right? Not very useful, but a truth. So as a result of all that, we're seeing this pretty significant uptick in suicides, completed suicides, a lot of suicidal thinking. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. One kind of cool thing that's happening is finally, somewhere between the beginning of the pandemic and this moment right now, the taboo around mental illness has lifted for the vast majority of kids. So I have kids come in, bring their friends in to introduce them to me, or they'll drop them off and pick them up. And so that taboo of like, oh, it's not cool and you're seeing a therapist, what's wrong with you, man? That's not happening the way it used to be. In fact, it's pretty untouchable as an issue. The problem is that since the pandemic, we have fewer therapy hours, qualified therapists available to work with the kids we need them to work with. So we've got kids who are now seeking therapy, and we don't have the hours available to them. So a lot of my colleagues, they don't like virtual work, or they found some other hobby. A lot of them somehow over the pandemic, charcuterie boards for parties. I don't know what, I can't tell you why that is, but that's a reality. In any event, I can imagine that those of you who are parents or social workers or psychologists or anywhere in that realm, you are now de facto therapists probably for the kids around you. And that adds to your burden as a caretaker for these kids. So that is another difficulty we're running into. Do you remember any of this stuff when we were growing up? Neither do I, because again, new teens and a new age of anxiety. Absolutely true. And so much of the lives of our kids takes place out of our purview. So just what our kids are listening to, I'll just focus for a second on just what our kids are hearing through their AirPods. So you might not know your child's favorite music artist. Your kids listening to podcasts constantly, long, extended podcasts that might be driving something about how they feel, about the opposite sex, about politics, about people in general, about the future, and shaping their worldview. And you might not be aware of that at all. And that's happening on the screens they're looking at. That's happening up in their bedrooms with the door closed, or down in the basement, or outside the house. So you're really the first generation of parents that needs to learn what it's like to be a kid from the kids. You really have to sit down with them and say, what are we listening to? What are we watching? Show me a minute of this. What's this video game like? Let me play this for a minute. Even if you're not interested, I urge you to get interested. And real briefly, lest you think, oh, my kid is not one of these kids. Thank God Duffy's not talking about one of my kids. Every single stressor I've mentioned so far is as potent for that A student working till 2 a.m. to get into Yale as that D student down in the basement playing video games till 2 o'clock in the morning and smoking weed. They're dealing with the same set of stressors in a completely different way. So I want you to really keep that in mind. No kid is immune right now. I'm concerned about all our kids. And there's some research to back that up. About 50% of our kids have reported being depressed and anxious in the last year. And if you ask anybody in my field or my field adjacent, they'll say that number is almost laughably low, that it's actually much higher than that. And the more alarming statistic is 25% of kids, 25% do not really value their lives. So the kind of thing I get sometimes walking out the door of this office here is, I'm not going to do anything, Dr. Duffy, to hurt myself. But if something happened, that wouldn't be the end of the world. If the bus hit me, I don't think anything that magnificent is going to happen in this lifetime. Kids really feel this way. So that's the press to create and drive hope. And that was 2019. So I thought I knew exactly how things were going to play out from there, and that my book was a little bit evergreen. And then this pandemic hits, and I have to revisit every chapter and see, does this even make sense anymore? Or is this worth a second edition? Well, it all made sense. And then some. I thought, maybe foolishly, that as we came out of the pandemic, the moods were going to buoy and lift for our kids pretty readily. That hasn't played out exactly like I thought. And there's a couple of reasons for that I'll hit on very briefly, and then we'll talk solutions. One is our kids lost this practice effect of connecting with each other socially. And that lasted for quite some time. So I'm seeing more social anxiety than I have ever seen before in kids who are really, really outgoing and social by nature, but they just lost so much time. And that practice, it turns out, is really, really important for kids. Another after effect is our kids are super jaded. And I want you to really listen to this part. So the way one boy put it to me, he said, back in March of 2020, my mom comes into my room and says, you know what? There's a thing going around. It's just going to be a long spring break for you. Lucky you. This is great. It's going to be a little bit of a weird summer. We'll have to buy some puzzles and some games, and we're going to be in the house a lot. To, hey, we're going to try something called asynchronous learning. You're going to wear a gas mask and a hazmat suit to class, and you're going to go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Tuesdays and Thursdays, you're going to lay at home in bed, turn off your camera, and pretend to go to school. And his point was, he was funny, but his big point really was, you guys didn't know anything we didn't know. I'm looking at the same alerts on my phone that you're looking at on yours. So whereas we got to grow up leaning on the adults in our lives and knowing, like, I think they've got us. I think if something heavy happens, we're going to be okay because mom and dad and the other adults, aunts, uncles, teachers, and so on, they've got us. And now they're not so convinced. Now they feel like, well, as a few kids have said to me, hey, we saw The Last of Us. That's probably science fiction to you, but that feels like it could happen to me, honestly. The other thing I'm noticing is that kids are sedentary. They are not moving. And I bet you're seeing this. I bet most of you listening can picture one child that either your child or somebody else, who is right now laying down on a couch, on a floor, in bed, in the middle of a day, or in the middle of an evening, right? That's happening way too often. The anxious energy is just building up in those adolescent bodies, really, really, really unhealthy. They feel less hope, which is such a precious commodity, because if you think about how we grew up, we got to be idealistic, we got to dream. I often tell the story that when I was a kid, my parents took me to see Ordinary People, which is a movie some of you may remember and some of you may not. But Judd Hirsch in that movie was a therapist in the suburbs of Chicago working with teenagers. And I remember thinking, I wouldn't mind doing that. And here we are a generation later, and I'm doing that. Our kids don't have the luxury of that kind of dream. They're not dreaming like that. They know too much. So we've got to bring something idealistic. And we can do it through adulting. So when I ask kids, do you want the lives your parents have? The answer consistently is no. I don't know if my parents are happy. Adulting doesn't look that fun to me. And if you want a nice recipe for hopelessness, that's a pretty good one, right? So I appreciate you coming to my TED Talk here, but there's more. So I've given you nothing but bad news. But with the right energy and tone and vibe, you have agency over what happens next. You can help write the better story for yourself, your kids, and the future. This is a big, big deal. So I think I promised 8 different tips on how to do this. So I'm going to do my best to rapid fire us through. Yeah, I think I can do this. I'm up to this challenge. So the first one, you may remember, it goes back about 6 weeks. The Surgeon General came out with this alert about parents' mental health, that they were deeply concerned that a third of parents that they had surveyed reported that they felt overwhelmed. Parents of young kids, tweens, teens, young adults, they were overwhelmed, some depressed, some anxious. Again, if you're in my field, a third feels low, but at least the Surgeon General is recognizing we have a crisis in the well-being of our parents. So we need to support them in a better way. And you might be hearing some policy coming from politicians running for office right now about how to help mitigate that, which I think is a really good step in a positive direction. On a micro level, I want you to think about self-care for a minute. How are you going to take care of yourself? So it turns out, like, that idea that cabin loses pressure and you put your oxygen mask on first, I never thought I would do that, but now I'm pretty sure I would, and I'm pretty sure you need to. So I want you to have a person that you know and love and trust, that you can talk to about your fears, your frustrations, your sadness, the things that you are going through. And that can be a spouse, a coworker, a friend, a sibling, one of your parents. I don't really care, as long as it's somebody you can really, really entrust with what you're going through, because let's be honest, this is a really hard time to raise kids. And you guys are doing really, really mighty work. You deserve and need some support. It takes a village. Use the village, please. We lecture our kids constantly about putting these things down, these screens, right? Get off of social media, quit playing those games. And yet, if we're all being honest, now we're taking an honest show of hands of the people who are with us right now, I'll bet most of us would say, I have definitely got an addiction problem with screens. So I encourage you to put those down at least sometimes. I'm working with some kids who have downloaded an app called Brick, which effectively blocks everything but your phone, texting, maybe the Uber app, maybe a map, maybe Spotify, so that all the superfluous stuff is not part of your day. And it changed their lives. So I encourage you to look into something like that for yourself. I also want you to keep hope alive for you. We need to model that hopefulness for our kids. So a lot of the parents I know are busy. You're all busy, right? People are working and people are raising kids, and parenting is a verb now, whereas a generation ago it wasn't. So we've probably let some of the things that we love and care about and are passionate about go. So if we're writers, we might not be writing. If we're musicians, we might not be playing. If we're athletes, we might not have run the marathon this past Sunday. Get that stuff back out and do that thing for yourself. Be passionate and follow your passions and do that now. Protect a little time in the day or in the week to do that. It's good for you. It keeps you on your game and it models something really, really important for your kids. And they will follow that model. They really will. More so than any lecture that you can offer, they will follow your model. So I want you to turn your attention gently to your home, to the space that you occupy. And I want you to consider for a second, what's the vibe in there? Is it loud and boisterous? Is it messy? Is it super quiet? Can you hear a clock ticking on the wall? Is it a happy place to be? And I've had parents say to me, well, I don't know what my kids like in a home. I'm not gonna put a slide in, you don't have to. Just think of an ambiance that works for you, a vibe that works for you, and that will probably work for your kid. But kids tell me about the vibe in their home, and when they cross that threshold, it matters to them. They're attentive to it. And some kids will avoid home because they'll say it's just too much. And they just don't want to be there. So if they come in and they run right up to their room, you might want to attend to that vibe. The next thing I'm going to ask you to do is a little trickier. Think about what your kids are getting from you. What is the vibe that they get from you? Chances are you might not know. You might have to ask a spouse or a partner or a friend, like, how am I coming across to my kids? Am I overbearing? Because we've got 18 different types of parenting, right? We've got available parenting and lawnmower parenting, and we're trying to find our lane. But something has to be organic to you. So think about how you come across and how you want to come across. And if you need one guidepost for that, I would encourage you to do this. I would encourage you to light up for your kids. That means that on the worst day, remember the degree to which you love this kid, because we can get caught up in the rigmarole of the day-to-day, all those stressors I was talking about, the screens that drive you crazy, the homework that's not getting done, the room that's a mess, the weird vape thing that you're finding. We can get caught up in this and we can lecture our kids and have only negative interactions with them from the age of 12 until the age they leave the house. That happens all the time. But there's something I'm playing with in my head called accomplice parenting, where it's kind of like, hey, we're on the same team. I am with you. There are so many things we have to change, but at the core, at the foundation, we're good. I've got you, I've got your back, and I love you. Because a lot of kids will tell me over the course of a given day, week, month, year, nobody lights up for them. Not a teacher, not a coach, not a boss, not a parent, and not themselves. And that makes them feel like, a couple of kids have said to me, literally, unnecessary. And the last thing we want our kids to feel is unnecessary. What a nightmare, right? That's hopelessness. But that lighting up lets them know, like, okay, this adult cares for me. I feel inclined to tell a brief story because I think I afforded myself 1 minute of grace here. So my son's high school swim coach is retiring. So we went to his last meet Friday night. And you can see that this coach, I don't even know if this guy's a good swim coach, but he lights up for these kids. For the worst swimmer, the slowest swimmer in the edges of the pool, he lights up and he holds them by the shoulder and he's looking at them and he's coaching them and he's letting them know, I care how you do. And I know that that's going to make an impact on that kid 10 years from now. That lighting up is huge. So make sure you do it on the worst day. On the worst day when your kid has committed the grandest offense of his or her life, let them know fundamentally, we're okay. We have work to do, but we are good. That's the unconditional positive regard you probably see in my books and other self-help books. The emotional bank account, so that your kids will recognize if you're in the black, they'll listen to you. But if you're in the red, you're just at war with them. And you're an obstacle to work around. You are not an ally. You're seen as a foe. And that is the worst place for a parent to be. Okay. Few more points, and then I want to take any questions you guys have. I mentioned that our kids are not moving, and they are not. So encourage movement in your kids. When I saw those kids on the swim deck, they were in a different place in their mind, body, and spirit than they normally are. They're not concerned about body image or screens or school or any of these stressors, right? So I like the pool. I like the orchestra pit and the stage and the debate room and the track and the field and the gridiron and all of that. Get your kid involved in something. I think if I were talking to this group a decade ago, I'd say our kids are too busy. They need free playtime. They need respite. Post-pandemic, our kids need to be moving, because the kids I'm working with who are struggling most are inert. They are not moving. And if I can get them moving in one direction or another, they're engaged, mind, body, and spirit. And at the end of the day, they're tired in the best way, in the way you want a teenager to be tired. Not tired because I've been laying around all day, but tired because I've been engaged and I've got people around me and my life is dynamic and my life is active, right? And it's not just about a few little things. It's also about this thing that matters to me. I'm part of something bigger than me. And that carries kids all the way through adolescence. If you've heard me speak before, you've definitely heard me make this next point, but I cannot stop myself from punctuating it. Most of our kids, at least sometimes, have a really negative thought about themselves. Usually it's one, but it's pretty awful. Like, I'm fat, I'm stupid, I'm a loser, people don't like me, I screwed something up really badly, I don't think I can fix it. I'm not sure I'm worth it or worthwhile. And our inclination as parents is to try to talk them out of that, right? No, you're smart and you're beautiful and you're fun and you're funny. And if people don't want to hang out with you, that's their problem. But when we do that, we're effectively saying, I can't handle the thing that you have, so you got to take that somewhere else. That drives hopelessness, because that kid either holds on to that thing by themselves and it grows like a cancer, you guys, or they go to another 14-year-old. And now you've got 14-year-olds trying to solve very, very adult problems. And all you need to do is listen to it. They don't need you to solve it. They are well aware it's not solvable and it's probably fleeting. So if you just hold it, that's the better story. And a little inside baseball, that's what happens in these therapy rooms. For those of us who work with teenagers, we usually create space safe enough that kids can tell us the thing and we hold it. But the better story is if you are the ones who do it, and that we all have to find, and I build charcuterie boards. I have to learn how to do that. So if you're willing to do that, that's going to move the needle for your kids a great deal. A couple other quick thoughts, and then we'll move on. There are a couple of current trends that I want you to note with your kids and draft off of. The shortcut here is, you may have heard of men who are raw dogging, I don't love this word, but it's the right word, flights. In other words, they're going on air flights and they're not bringing a magazine, they're not bringing food, they're not bringing a phone, they're just staring straight ahead, which seems like a bizarre thing to do. But some kids are saying they're raw dogging the internet. So they're carrying around flip phones and they love that. They realize, oh, I'm looking up more. I'm not worried about what's on this phone. I don't feel FOMO after maybe a week or two. And people think it's pretty cool that the thing everybody else is addicted to, I'm not even using. I'm not even looking at most of the time. So there is a trend and it is happening. Kids are talking to me about it. I'm working with 4 kids right now who are using this idea. The other thing that's happening, the other raw dog thing that's happening is kids are considering whether to drink or not. Kids are coming into me and they're like, I don't know, do I want to do this? When I work with kids who are a little bit older and have been drinking for a year or two, they'll tell me, I think I'm losing the whole next day. I'd rather get up and go to the gym or hang out with my friends. I don't want to lose Saturday. I love Saturday. And so They're considerate about like how much they drink or whether they drink at all. The same is happening to a different degree with smoking. Some kids are recognizing, I don't think I'm thinking very clearly. I think I'm moving slowly. I feel stupid. So I think I might want to change that. So there are these trends toward a much healthier lifestyle that kids are coming up with on their own without lectures. They're recognizing organically in their bodies and in their minds, some of this stuff isn't working for me. I'm going to try something different. So make note of those and just ask them what they think and see and plant the seed and let's see what happens. Seek help when you need help. So trust your radar. If your child's behavior changes dramatically, if they're suddenly wearing different clothes, if they're up alone in their room all the time, if they're with a wildly different group of friends, or they tell you, I don't think I'm okay. Trust them and believe them and seek help. Seek out someone like me. And one more little bit of inside baseball. Most of us are really busy. Don't let us off the hook really easily. Press a little bit. Tell us your story. We're in this business because we want to help. So push a little bit and we'll either help you or we'll find somebody who will help you because we're pretty good referral sources. One last tip, and this is going to sound weird, hug your kids. I work with so many young people who tell me, I don't remember last time I made physical contact with another person. And so intimacy being lacking in their lives, we think that starts maybe what, at a dance or something like that, or, asking someone out. That's not what's happening with young people today. Intimacy starts at home. Every day when I was a kid, and my dad was not a very good father to young kids. He was short-tempered. He wasn't very available, but he kissed me on the forehead every night. And I remember knowing, I think I'm good with him. So that makes a huge difference. Hug your kids, show them a little intimacy. And finally, I'll end with this. What I'm hearing more since the pandemic than anything else is we're doing a terrible job as parents. This house is a mess. I meant to do Pilates. I was going to lose weight. These kids are just laying around or watching TV and looking at screens. Nothing good is happening. That negative self-talk is not allowed at the Glenbard Parent Series. So I want you to keep in mind that you just parented through the hardest thing. And this is a very, very difficult time with a lot of blind spots for parenting. You're doing a great job. You're here now listening to a guy talk about parenting. So God love you. You're doing a great job. Extend that grace to yourself and extend that grace to your children as well, who are also being kids through a very, very difficult time. So be kind and gentle with yourself. Be kind and gentle with your people. And if anybody has any thoughts, questions, comments, smart remarks, if they disagree, let me know. Thank you for listening, guys.
So much good there. Whenever we close a GPS, especially at 7 o'clock, I always say, go hug your kids. And I got that from you.
Oh, thank you, Gilda. Yeah, that I don't think we can emphasize enough how important that is. A lot of kids will tell me somewhere around 12 or 13, my parents, who were my people up until that time, now seem to be policing me. They seem to be looking for the thing I'm doing wrong, right? And so I want to work around them. And, so I want to find, I might lie about like how things are going in school just to buy myself some time. I might sneak out of the house, but I'm no longer do I feel like we have an alliance. I feel like now you're an obstacle. And so that hug, that little bit of affection, even if there isn't a word tied to it. I've worked with parents who've said, I love you does not come easily to me. And I get that. I get that some people weren't brought up that way, but the hug changes the dynamic of a family and a household. And it makes that kid who feels like a me, a very singular me, a we, like, okay, I've got people. And so many kids, you guys, don't believe that they have people. They think they are in asylum. They really believe they are very much alone, and they don't think there is an antidote to that. But that hug, that little bit of affection right there in the first moment, it will change the way they look at themselves, their world, and their future. It pays dividends like you wouldn't believe, and probably avoids pitfalls we don't even want to think about.
Mhm. Someone once said that the reaction that we get when we walk in the door from our dogs is the same reaction we should try to emulate when your child walks in the door as well. And I love what you said about, taking a minute to really think about that vibe. I also jotted down about, you talked about, they they are entitled to those emotions. And when we say, don't sit on this sad bench, go sit on this happy bench. I mean, we're really, so we go, I think what you're saying is go sit on the bench with them.
Yes.
They'll probably get up before you get up, but let them know that you are there with them in that moment. Do I have that
Yes.
right?
Yes, yes, Gil. And it's mighty parenting, right? To know like my child has this awful thought about themselves. Because let's face it, like my son, the last thing I ever want is for him to feel badly about himself. And I know you all feel the same way. And so the inclination to talk them out of is so potent. It is really mighty to just sit on that bench and to hold that for them and just
Mhm.
say, well, that sucks. I'm sorry you feel that way. But knowing that you have that and that they can come back to you the next time they feel something like that is such a big deal. And to maybe bring the alarm bells down on that a little bit, think about when you were a teenager and think about how you felt. That there were days, I think for all of us, where we felt something really, really negative about ourselves, right? And we don't have the capacity at that age, right? 14, 15, 16, 17, we don't have that lifetime of experience to know everything's going to be okay, right? So just knowing we can leave something with mom and dad and just move on, that helps a lot. But things feel really urgent and pressing. What you're hearing probably is reality blown up, right? So you don't have to worry unless your child tells you do, that they're not okay. Because probably they're just having a moment like we've all had when we were that age, right? Where something,
Mhm.
we're not invited to the thing on Friday, it is it is the end of the world, right? Like that is a nightmare and nothing could ever be worse and nothing is ever going to get better. And you cannot talk me out of that. That is
Right.
a normal adolescent feeling, right? And that's, and so if we can afford them that and say, that's a bummer. I got it. I hear you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That is good mental health, right? They were disappointed, that's to be expected. They're not gonna be happy every single minute, but to acknowledge that and have the compassion for that. I love what you said when you talked about how because they've missed this time to practice relationships, our relationship with them becomes that much more necessary,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. Yes. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. We're,
Okay.
we're surrogates in so many ways, right? Because that practice effect has to happen, at least in part, at home, so that they can get used to like, how do I talk to people? How do I look people in the eye? I mean, this is really tricky for a lot of teenagers. And I noticed that some of them, they don't meet my eyes. They come close. Like they'll look just underneath my eyes. There's something that almost our kids, what one kid said, and not as an insult to anyone, but he said, I feel like I have slipped onto a spectrum somehow. And I
Mhm.
don't know my way through this, right? Because I can't look people in the eye. It feels like too much. So if you
Mhm.
give them some practice for that and you
Mhm.
engage them in
Mhm.
conversation,
Yeah.
the difficulty in engaging in kids in conversation now is part of it is meeting them where they are in their world. And
Mhm.
so it's asking a lot of questions. And some of this stuff, what I hear from a lot of parents is, yeah, you
Mhm.
know what? I'm not interested. I'm not interested in the rap music. I'm not interested in the video game. And what I urge you to do is to find interest in your child's interest, right? So um,
Yeah.
I get it. I'm not a big rap fan myself. I can't stand video games, but I
Mhm.
will ask a kid like,
Mhm.
so you're playing this Grand Theft Auto. Tell me, or why Minecraft? Like why that game? Why do you like this band so much? Like what about that is such a
Mhm.
big deal to you. Like I sometimes find what they do offensive, like, or whatever it is, like I wouldn't
Mhm.
listen to that podcast. I think that's a racist podcast. What
Mhm.
draws you to that? And then you've
Mhm.
got a discussion going. And when
Right.
you engage a discussion on their level, Gilda, you're effectively saying, I respect your opinion. Like I understand and respect your opinion. I'm not just going to tell you you're wrong.
Right.
Our parents could have gotten away with that. They could say, you are forbidden from doing that.
Right.
Forbidding kids now? Do we really
Yeah.
think we're not going to find their way to whatever it is we're forbidding them from? And then we create a liar out of our kids, which we don't want to do.
No, no, no. Someone said, "Be a curious scientist." Without, and if they say something alarming, get that face on. Oh, okay. So tell me more. All right, we're going to get into the questions now. How do I find a good therapist?
Yeah. So there's a number of ways to do that. Uh, I recommend this. I'm going to give you a couple ideas. One is to go to the social worker at school, the psychologist at school, some adult that you know at the school. People at schools know therapists, right? Um, if you know another parent in the Glenbard Parent Series or some other parenting group that you belong to, ask them what they've heard. Take shame out of it and ask a lot of people. Like, do you know a good therapist in the area who works with teenagers?
Mhm.
Um, Psychology Today lists therapists. I find that useful on occasion. The most clever method I have found is that if you looked on Amazon right now, or you went to a bookstore and you looked at parenting titles and you looked at where those experts are in the country, reach out to those experts. We've all got websites. We've all got ways to get in touch with us. Everybody's looking for business, even if we're really busy. So, and once you get a therapist on the line, and I have a Substack about this, by the way, that I would encourage you to read that gives you some ideas. But if you get somebody on the line, let them be your social worker for you. Ask them like, okay, so I understand you're really busy. Who do you got for me? And let them know your story. And they will know, oh yeah, there actually is this person who I used to work with years ago who I think might have some availability. So let me refer you to that person. And anybody you get on the line, get the next person, because it's really important. You're asking a great question. It's important to find the right therapist early. Whereas we might, as adults, try 2 or 3 or 4 therapists before we feel like, I think I've got the right person. Sometimes with our teenagers, we might get 1 shot and we might get 2, right? But we're not going to get 3. So we've got to find the right person right away. So I encourage you to interview that therapist also. And what I look for isn't like, what license do you have on the wall? If there's a license there, great. Master's, doctorate, I don't much care. I want to know that that person has worked with somebody your child's age, knows how to talk to those people, and is familiar with the issues that you're dealing with.
Mhm.
Those are the metrics you're looking for.
Mhm. Very good. More questions. I know you talk about this a lot, and we really know the answer, but you have to remind us about the importance of good sleep and what we can do to help our kids with good sleep.
Yes, yes, yes. There's a great book called The Sleep Deprived Child. I'm not sure if she's speaking to GPS, but I imagine she may at some point. And Lisa effectively says, um, none of our kids are sleeping enough. The recommendation hasn't changed out of convenience. It's 8 to 10 hours a night for teenagers. And our teenagers are super, super busy. The best way to do it is to get screens out of rooms. And I know that's a tricky thing to do. In my experience, and parents will tell me, oh, we've blown that. We let that happen years ago. But if you're willing to take the screens out of your room, and this is something I did in my house when I read an article about sleep in the New York Times, and the screens are so stimulating that they will keep us up for another hour or 2 just by looking at it. It doesn't have to be interesting. It's just stimulating. So if you keep screens downstairs or away in the kitchen, somewhere away from the bedrooms, and you do it yourself, your kid's going to push back for a minute, maybe for a week, maybe for 2, but eventually they will get acclimated to it and they will find a new rhythm. So this is one, you don't get many parent cards that you get to play where it's like, this is non-negotiable, this is going to happen. And you're not gonna like it, but I saw a guy talk tonight and you're gonna have to do what this guy said to do. So if you do nothing else, keep the phones out of rooms, right? Like, and then you come a long way. All screens out of rooms, and then you're going to foster sleep far more readily. And if your kid says, "Oh, I need it," or "I'll read on my phone," that's stimulating as well. If they're willing to read a book before they fall asleep, I'm all for that, a physical book. But anything short of that, kids organically can fall asleep, and they need to fall asleep way earlier than they think they do. So homework probably has to start an hour earlier, and I'd start titrating it back, by the way. I do it a half an hour at a time. So if your kid's up till midnight, let's try 11:30. Everybody's in bed at 11:30. A month I'd go for 11. I wouldn't say like, all right, we're going to move it back 10, we're moving it back 2 hours because an expert told us we need to do that. But in the end, your kid will function better, will be happier, will be less depressed, will be less anxious if he or she gets at least that 8 hours of sleep. And I only know a few teenagers who are getting it, and it shows. It shows in their symptoms and the resistance of their symptoms to treatment.
What happens when you have a parent who's just not on the same page with you in the parenting that you believe in, or you're divorced? How do we work together?
Yeah, it's that's super tricky. And I so feel for you because parenting together, right? If you've got two people who are roughly on the same page, it's still a challenge. If you've got two people who are not particularly inclined toward each other and not on the same page and parenting with very, very different styles, that becomes even more problematic. My answer, I promise you, is going to sound absurd to you, but the one thing that you and that person probably agree on, even if you can't stand them, is you want that child to thrive. So my bias is you can disagree about money and all sorts of different things, right? But I would get in front of a parent coach. And you can do it virtually, but they'll walk you through kind of how to come up with an agreement where both of your needs are getting met, and your child's needs are getting met. What you don't want to do, and what I run into a lot in circumstances like this, is having some degree of vindication play out through the child. So you want to think about whether you're doing that, whether your former partner is doing that, and how to mitigate that. You can have 1,000 text exchanges, but a couple of sessions with a parent coach to come up with a kind of an ironclad agreement, sometimes on paper. That's the best way I have found to make sure, okay, we're parenting from the same place and we can keep arguing about or never ever speak about anything else, but we're going to parent from this space so that these certain pillars don't change depending on where our child lays their head at night.
One parent has written, I tell my kids, take the best of each parent. I like that.
I love that.
Excuse me. And quickly, when they go off to college and they have access 24/7, I'm thinking you'd probably say develop those habits now, because you're right, they will be on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, so I work with so many people who will call me when their kid's a freshman or sophomore in high school, tell me we're in crisis, we need help right now. And the crisis usually isn't a crisis. It's usually a learning opportunity of some kind. This is the time while your kid is under your roof to make all sorts of mistakes. Like, a mistake is a learning opportunity every single time, because you picture, like exactly as Gilda's describing, in the not too distant future, and I can tell you with authority, that future comes fast. Your kid is going to be on their own. So you want your voice in their head. And the way to get it there is to work with them now on developing really, really good habits. And that's like, we're talking about sleep. We're talking about protecting time for getting work done, for the sanctuary of taking care of your body or your mind in some other way. all of these habits, if you develop them now, you don't have to fight that battle in school. What happens in school when they're away is they'll reach out to you, and this happens all the time, and say, I'm having a really hard time in this class, and I need your help. I got to think this through. And you become the ally they turn to. You become a tool in their toolbox when they're in college, and you're helping them get through because you guys already have this working alliance that's now years old. That works 100%.
You're going to finish this last sentence for me, okay? Love the child in front of you, not the child you expected or dreamt about or hoped for or imagined. Why do I need to love that child in front of me?
Because that child is the reason that you've got into this parenting business in the first place. And if that child meets every expectation you have and every wish that you have, that child is unnecessary. You don't need that. The marvel of parenting is that somebody that you have helped raise has developed a personality and a point of view and a way of living their life separate and apart from you. If your child is different from you and sees the world in a different way, my God, that is the most wonderful parenting win. If you develop a clone, I'm not that impressed. If you develop somebody who is considerate and thinks on their own, even if it's a different thought than you have, if they're interested in something that you would not want them to be interested in, but they're really passionate about it, you've done a great job. That is the win of parenting. The marvel is to see their story unfold, recognizing this is their story. This isn't my story. I have the privilege of being part of it. That's the cool part of parenting.
So many hearts, so many hands on our hearts as we thank you. As always, we always learn from you. Thank you so much. You've really made a difference today. And now let's go hug the kids.
Let's hug the kids. Thank you,
Thank you
guys.
so much. See you next time, everybody.